The true story of Frank Lucas, the Harlem drug lord who built a heroin empire. The Harlem kingpin who inspired American Gangster Frank Lucas began importing and distributing blue magic heroin in the late 1960s and made a fortune. It's no wonder why Ridley Scott made American Gangster a movie based on the life of Harlem heroin kingpin Frank Superfly Lucas. The details of his ascent to the upper echelons of the 1970s drug trade are as wildly cinematic as they are likely exaggerated. What better medium to tell much of a trumped-up tale than a Hollywood blockbuster? Though the 2007 movie is supposedly based on a true story, starring Denzel Washington as Frank Lucas, many in Lucas' orbit have said that the film is largely fabricated. But piecing together the truth of his life and his many misdeeds is a daunting task. The most well-known profile of the man Mark Jacobson's The Return of the Superfly, which the film is largely based on, relies mostly on Frank Lucas's own first-hand accounts that is full of boast and braggadocio from a notorious braggart, trickster, and fibber. If you aren't familiar with Lucas or the film, in today's episode, join us as we look at some of the wildest details about his life. Who was Frank Lucas? Born on September 9, 1930 in La Grange, North Carolina, Frank Lucas had a rough start to life. He grew up poor and spent a lot of time looking after his siblings, and living in the Jim Crow South took a toll on him. According to Lucas, he was first inspired to enter a life of crime after he witnessed Ku Klux Klan members murdering his 12-year-old cousin Obadiah when he was just 6 years old. The Klan claimed that Obadiah had engaged in some reckless eyeballing of a white woman, so they fatally shot him. Lucas reportedly fled to New York in 1946 after beating up his former boss at a pipe company and robbing him of $400, and he quickly realized there was much more money to be made in the Big Apple. From robbing local bars at gunpoint to swimming diamonds from jewelry, he slowly became bolder and bolder with his crimes. He eventually caught the eye of drug trafficker Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, who acted as a mentor of sorts to Lucas and taught him everything he knew. While Lucas took Johnson's teachings to the next level with his crime organization, there was a sad and ironic twist to Lucas's desire to get back at the KKK members who murdered his cousin. Thanks to his deadly brand of imported heroin known as Blue Magic, he ended up wreaking havoc in Harlem, one of New York City's most iconic black neighborhoods. Frank Lucas has probably destroyed more black lives than the KKK could ever dream of, prosecutor Richie Roberts told the New York Times in 2007. How Frank Lucas supposedly got his hands on this blue magic is perhaps the wildest detail of all. He allegedly smuggled a 98% pure heroin into the United States by using the coffins of dead soldiers coming home from Vietnam. Jacobson calls it his most cultural pungent claim to fame. Of all the dreadful iconography of Vietnam, the napalm girl running down the road, Kali at my lie, etc., dope in the body bag, death begetting death, most hideously conveys spreading pestilence. The metaphor is almost too rich. To his credit, Lucas said that he didn't put the smack next to the bodies or inside the bodies as some legends have suggested. "No way I'm touching a dead anything," he told Jacobson. "Bet your life on that." He instead said that he had a carpenter body flown in to make the 28 copies of government coffins rigged up with false bottoms. With help from former U.S. Army Sergeant Leslie Atkinson, who was just so happened to be married to one of his cousins, Lucas claimed to have smuggled more than $50 million worth of heroin into the United States. He said $100,000 of what was on the plane carrying Harry Kingston, and that he was at the point dressed up as a lieutenant colonel to aid in the operation. If this so-called cadaver connection story sounds like anything in possible operation, it just might have been. It is a total lie that's fueled by Frank Lucas for personal gain. Atkinson told the Toronto Star in 2008, "I never had anything to do with transporting heroin in coffins or canned overs." Though Atkinson fessed up to smuggling, he said it was inside furniture and that Lucas wasn't involved with making the connection. From low-ranking drug dealer to American Gangster. How Lucas managed to get his hands on blue magic might have been a fabrication, but there's no denying that it made him a rich man. "I wanted to be rich," he told Jacobson. "I wanted to be Donald Trump rich, and so help me God, I made it." He claimed to be making $1 million per day at one point, but that too was later discovered to be an exaggeration. In any case, he was still determined to show off his newly acquired wealth. So in 1971, he decided to wear a $100,000 full chinchilla coat at a Muhammad Ali boxing match. But as he later wrote, this was a massive mistake. Apparently, Lucas' coat caught the eye of law enforcement, who were so surprised that he had better seats than Diana Ross and Frank Sinatra. As Lucas puts it, "I left that fight a marked man." So regardless of how much money he was actually making, Lucas didn't get to enjoy the fruit of his labor for very long. After supposedly hobnobbing with some of New York's wealthiest and most famous folks in the early 70s, the famously fur-clad Frank Lucas was arrested in 1975, thanks in part to Robert's efforts and some mafia snitching. The drug lord's assets were seized and frozen, including $584,683 in cash, and he was sentenced to 70 years in prison. Lucas later bristled at such a low count of cash money and accused the DEA of stealing from him, according to Superfly, the true untold story of Frank Lucas, American Gangster. 584,000, that's what Superfly boasted. In Las Vegas, I lost 500 G's in half an hour playing baccarat with a green-haired whore. Later, Superfly would tell his television interviewer that the figure was actually $20 million. And with time, the story has kept getting longer like Pinocchio's nose. Lucas likely would have been in prison for the rest of his life if he didn't become a government informant, enter the Witness Protection Program, and ultimately helped the DEA nab more than 100 drug-related convictions. One relatively minor setback aside, a 7-year sentence for an attempted drug deal in his post-informant's life, he went on parole in 1991. Overall, Lucas managed to get through everything relatively unscathed and reportedly enriched. According to the New York Post, Lucas received $300,000 from Universal Pictures and another $500,000 from the studio and Denzel Washington to buy a house and a new car. But at the end of the day, beyond the ravages of his famous blue magic, Lucas was an admitted murderer and an admitted liar on a grand scale. In some of his last interviews, Frank Lucas walked back a bit of the braggadocio, admitting for instance that he only had one false bottom coffin made. And for what it's worth, Lucas also admitted that only 20% of American Gangster is true. But the guys that busted him said that that's also an exaggeration. DEA agent Joseph Sullivan, who raided Lucas' home back in 1975, said it's closer to the single digits. His name is Frank Lucas, and he was a drug dealer, and that's where the truth in this movie ends. The death of Frank Lucas. Unlike other famous gangsters, Frank Lucas didn't go out in a blaze of glory. He died in 2019 at the age of 88 in New Jersey. His nephew, who confirmed his death to the press, said that he died of natural causes. By the time Lucas died, he had become pretty good friends with Richie Roberts, the man who helped bust him, and ironically enough, Roberts eventually ended up getting in double trouble with the law himself, pleading guilty to tax crimes in 2017. "I am not only one to condemn anyone for anything that they do," Roberts said after Frank Lucas' death. "Everyone gets a second chance in my world. Frank did the right thing by cooperating." Did he cause a lot of pain and hardship? Yeah, but that is all business. On a personal level, he was very charismatic. He could be very likable, but I wouldn't want to. Well, I was on the wrong end of him. There was a contract in me at one time. Robert had a chance to talk to Lucas just a few weeks before he died and was able to tell him goodbye. Although he was aware that the former drug kingpin was in poor health, he still found it hard to believe that Frank Lucas was really gone. He said, "You expected him to live forever." Now you know more about Frank Lucas, the Harlem drug lord kingpin who built a heroin empire, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more videos on crime stories, notorious outlaws, and historical scandals.